A 15-month Dateline investigation.
They turned my life into a shambles.
We uncovered sealed court records.
They don't have the right to do this to people.
Found thousands of documents.
Is there any way that could be your signature?
Highly unlikely.
Tracked down insiders.
We didn't know the person, so by not knowing the person, I guess we really didn't care.
Broke computer codes.
This wasn't an independent medical opinion. What was it?
It was a real fast way to close a file.
To tell you what some in the insurance industry don't want you to know.
Doctor, with all due respect, how do you know it represented your view if you never even looked at it?
When thinking about insurance, if you have it, if you need it, a special investigation you can't afford to miss.
I thought I had peace of mind with coverage. It wasn't there.
John Larson and a Dateline investigation. The Paper Chase. From our studios in New York, here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Tonight, the results of a 15-month Dateline investigation. We uncovered thousands of documents, cracked computer codes, talked to dozens of sources, and discovered a little-known practice that could leave you unprotected when you need help most. If you drive a car, you've probably got insurance. You pay those premiums, so if you're in an accident, your medical bills will be covered. But if you think you'll always be taken care of, think again. As we discovered, for some, one of the best known and biggest insurance companies in the world was not always a good neighbor. Here's John Larson with tonight's Dateline investigation.
In June of 1993, Lucretia Duffy was driving through her neighborhood in Fairbanks, Alaska, when out of nowhere, a truck ignored a yield sign and broadsided her car.
All I saw was black truck and grill.
Lucretia was hurt and almost immediately began racking up expensive doctor's bills. She didn't have health insurance, but she did have auto insurance, which covered injuries caused by accidents. So she called her insurance agent, who promised to help.
All my medical bills would be taken care of. Don't worry about anything. And that's not what happened.
If you're like a lot of people, you buy insurance trusting it will pay off when you need it. And most of the time, that's exactly what happens. But what happens when it doesn't? What happens behind the scenes when an insurance company decides to challenge your claim? Tonight, we're going to tell you about part of the insurance business you've probably never heard of. So unknown that many of the highest-ranking state insurance officials weren't even aware of it. A practice used by nearly every major insurance company in the nation, involving some people who may not have your best interests at heart.
I don't understand people being that dishonest.
Our questions into what happened to Lucretia Duffy launched a 15-month Dateline investigation into her insurance company, State Farm, the largest in the nation. We interviewed more than 250 people, reviewed more than 70,000 pages of documents, and examined 2 companies that State Farm did business with. What we found was a disturbing pattern in the way State Farm handled thousands of accident claims.
If you're hungry, you eat.
Lucretia Duffy, a home daycare operator, had faithfully paid her premiums for 15 years. But before State Farm paid her bills, it did what a lot of insurance companies do. It said it wanted the advice of another doctor, a second opinion, to decide which bills to pay. After all, some injuries like Lucretia's, which involve pain in the joints and muscles, are easier to fake than most. The auto insurance industry estimates it loses $5.5 billion to phony claims every year. And Lucretia was taking an unusual amount of time to heal. Plus, her x-rays showed a degenerative condition in her joints, and she had had polio as a child. So State Farm shipped Lucretia's paperwork from Alaska to a doctor in San Diego.
I had no idea who this person was.
Didn't you go to see him?
No.
Didn't he examine you?
No.
But 9 months after Lucretia's accident, State Farm got back this report, signed by a doctor, that surprisingly called her injuries minor. The doctor concluded that her difficulties were most likely not caused by the accident, but by a pre-existing bone condition. Bottom line, State Farm took the doctor's recommendation that only a small fraction of Lucretia's bills were justified in relation to the accident and paid only $780 of Lucretia's bills.
When you got that information, what was your reaction?
Stunned.
Lucretia may have been stunned, but medical reviews like the one she got are written all the time. State Farm says it uses them for claims that seem questionable, about 1 out of every 20. That's at least 35,000 claims a year. And what better way for State Farm to get an honest, independent opinion than from a doctor who doesn't work for State Farm? It's called a paper review because the patients are never actually examined. Only their paperwork is, their medical files and accident reports. And doctors tell us you can learn a lot from paperwork, even find fraud. But consider what happened in Lucretia's case.
The bills were $500, $1,000?
Oh, they were thousands.
Thousands of dollars.
They were over 10,000 probably by that time.
Could you pay them?
No.
Lucretia was instantly plunged into debt. Bill collectors began calling at all hours. And then the clinic, where she was getting treatment, still unpaid, refused to continue treating her unless she paid cash.
Now, surely you must have gone back to State Farm and said, you know, please, 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 look at this again.
I was on the phone with them all the time.
What frustrated Lucretia the most was that State Farm did not seem to be considering her own doctor's opinion, who had examined her in person and felt sure Lucretia's injuries were caused by the accident. It seemed to come down to one doctor's opinion versus another's. At least that's what it looked like, until we discovered who was really writing some of the doctor's reports sent to State Farm.
I did over 30. I completed over 30 cases myself.
We found this man, Edwin Newton, who told us he created medical opinions for the same San Diego company as the doctor who did Lucretia's paper review, Comprehensive Medical Review, or CMR. But Newton wasn't exactly a doctor.
What kind of training do you have?
I'm a writer.
A writer? What was your college degree in?
News editing.
Journalism?
Journalism.
No medical training at all?
None.
Newton, who now works for a small newspaper, told us in the CMR Vancouver office where he worked, he, along with a paralegal, a former teacher, and a nurse, created doctors' opinions, deciding whether accident victims like Lucretia had received appropriate treatment.
And of course, with my great medical ability, I could really make the determination now, couldn't I?
Newton says CMR provided him with a computer containing stock paragraphs of medical opinions, opinions that were put into reports and sent to State Farm.
These are pre-programmed bits of information that you just slide in.
Right.
Makes you sound like a doctor.
Sounds pretty impressive.
Newton worked at CMR for 3 months until he was let go, shortly before the branch office closed. Remember, this is the same company whose doctors produced Lucretia's report, the report State Farm used to justify not paying her bills. Unable to afford more treatment, Lucretia says her pain became too much to handle.
So you start planning ways of killing yourself. You plan how you're going to do it.
Did State Farm know that people with no medical training were writing what were supposed to be doctors' reports? And what would the paper review company, CMR, say when we confronted its president?
I've been hearing rumors of this for 6 months, so you may as well fire away.